Hello and welcome to Filling the Sink, a podcast from Catalan News. My name's Beth Cohen and today we'll be talking about Pope Francis and religion in Catalonia. On April the 21st, Pope Francis passed away, aged 88. His death marks a significant moment for the Roman Catholic Church, and more than 250,000 mourners flocked to the Vatican to pay their respects. Today, we'll be discussing the importance of Pope Francis and exploring his relationship with Catalonia. Joining me in the studio is Gerard Escaich Folch. Hello, Gerard.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for coming in.
It's a pleasure.
So, Gerard, as far as I understand, the papacy is currently in a state of sede vacante, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sede vacante in Latin means vacant headquarters. However, these vacant headquarters could soon be filled up from tomorrow, because we are publishing this podcast on Tuesday, just the day before the conclave starts on May the 7th. And why there's a sede vacante, you may ask? Well, you just mentioned it. Pope Francis passed away on April 21st, on Monday, April 21st, Easter Monday here in Catalonia.
And at the moment, we're in the period between the death of a pope and the election of a new one.
Exactly.
So, Gerard, the turnout for Pope Francis' funeral was impressive. There were over 250,000 mourners from around the world. What can you tell me about the funeral celebration?
Yeah, it was held on Saturday, April 26, and among the major and the thousands of people in attendance, there were also many Spanish figures, such as the Spanish monarchs, Spanish government, or also like world leaders such as EU Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen, French President Emmanuel Macron, or even Prince William or the US President Donald Trump, Joe Biden, the former president, and the one that obviously everyone saw the picture, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
That's an impressive turnout. Why was Pope Francis such a popular pope?
Well, many people will say that Pope Francis was very humble. In fact, Pope Francis comes from St. Francis d'Assisi, so a saint looking out for the poor people. So that's what Pope Francis wanted to welcome into the church. Stay away from luxuries, including his vehicles. He even left out the luxury vehicles and used normal cars such as Fiat Cinquecentos or
Yes,
Ford Focus.
I've seen pictures of him in a black Fiat 500.
Or even he was even gifted a limited edition of a white, yellow, golden Lamborghini based on the Vatican flag colors, and he gave it to charity because obviously he was not going to drive a Lamborghini.
I'm not surprised he's popular. And also in his choice of accommodation. So instead of staying in the Apostolic Palace where popes usually live, he chose to live in the Vatican guest house, Casa Santa Maria, in a much more humble apartment. And I believe this caused quite a stir.
Well, they had to prepare a clerical house for a pope. And obviously that site was not well prepared in advance.
No, it's usually where cardinals stay during a conclave. So now, these are very practical life choices. And I think it's also worth mentioning that Pope Francis was the first pope from the Americas, so perhaps he offered a different perspective.
Yeah, Pope Francis, born in Argentina, he was the first American pope and the first Southern American pope, not only, in history, and the first non-European pope in centuries, since the 8th century.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's been a long time. Just a fun fact, there were some Spanish popes back in the 15th century as well. Spanish popes, according to Vatican's data, based on current geopolitical borders. So, obviously, things have changed and history has, changed. One of them was Pope Calixtus III, who became the Pope in 1455, and a few years later it was Pope Alexander VI, who became the Pope in 1492.
So it's been a long time since we had a Spanish-speaking Pope in power. And coming back to the present, Gerard, perhaps thanks in part to his Argentine heritage, Pope Francis was described as being very approachable and easy to talk to compared to perhaps his predecessors. What can you tell me about his interest in current affairs?
Well, the main one, obviously the one that he tackled the most and he was more questioned about was the Catholic Church sexual abuse cases. When he was chosen the Pope in 2013, he already spoke out against the sexual abuses and the several litigations going on around the world in this subject. but he also spoke out against climate change and was openly critical of social injustice. Let's remember Pope Francis and Francis of Assisi. So, he was against poverty and repression of minorities.
Of course, that's very much in line with the values of his faith. In English, we'd say to practice what you preach. I think Pope Francis' inclusive attitude went a long way towards modernising the image of the Church and, of course, bringing its values closer to those of modern society without compromising the fundamental pillars of his faith.
Well, he has been referred to as a visionary leader who tried to reform the Church and modernizing, as you said, and obviously one of the most interesting modernizations, if we could call it that way, is talking about the LGBT plus community in several interviews, opening the Church to them, also talking about divorce, and having a little bit more of an approach to teenagers and youngsters to make it a more open and international church. We have to keep in mind that he named a lot of the cardinals that are going to vote in the conclave, and it's the most international conclave ever because a lot of them were named by Pope Francis and they are from all over the world, rather than just European as we're used to.
So he tried to make the Church a much more welcoming and inclusive institution. Gerard, this is all very interesting, but what does it have to do with Catalonia? What was his relationship with Catalonia?
Well, Pope Francis, literally a week before dying, he took the first steps towards beatification of Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí, the mastermind of the Infini Sagrada Familia Basilica, one of the most famous buildings in Barcelona, Spain, and even the world, I would say.
And in terms of the Pope's connections with Catalonia, I think it's also worth mentioning that the Archbishop of Barcelona, Cardinal Juan José Omeya, was a close advisor to the Pope.
Yeah, Juan José Omeya, who was born in Cretas in Aragon, the Spanish western region to Catalonia. He has been serving as the Archbishop of Barcelona since his installation on December 26, 2015, so under Pope Francis' papacy. And he became a cardinal also by Pope Francis in June 2017. And just so you know, he is the only Catalan-related voting power that Catalonia has in the conclave, because he's 79 years old, so just 1 year below the 80 years mark.
So you can't vote if you're over 80?
Yeah, exactly. You cannot vote if you're over 80.
Hang on a minute. So if he's able to vote, he could potentially also present himself as Pope.
Yeah, he could be the next Pope. Imagine a Catalan, well, not a Catalan Pope, but a Spanish Pope again after so many centuries. But Juan José Omeya has already said that his wish is not to be the next Pope, but to remain in Barcelona and looking after the Archbishop of Barcelona.
Mm-hmm. And Pope Francis was a native Spanish speaker, but he was also aware of the Catalan language. In fact, during the blessing of the Moreneta in October 2023, he was surprised to be asked to recite in Spanish.
No está en castellano. Dios de ternura en castellano, sí. ¿Tiene que ser en catalán o...? Lo pone.
Dios de ternura y misericordia, que al redimir el linaje humano, quisiste darnos a María.
As you've heard, it's Pope Francis asking if it should be written in Catalan, and Juan José Omeya, the Archbishop of Barcelona, is the one that replies to him, no, in Spanish. We've heard about the relationship between Pope Francis and the Catalan language. We've heard about the relationship between Pope Francis and Juan José Omeya. And we also heard about the relationship between Pope Francis and Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí. And one of the other things that related Catalonia with Pope Francis is that he was even invited to Camp Nou to see Lionel Messi, another Argentinian, play soccer with Javier Mascherano in a match.
And did he come?
No, he never came to Catalonia.
What a shame, but what a cool fun fact.
But those are not the only relationships between Catalonia and Pope Francis.
Hello, my name is Míriam Díez Bosch. I am the founder director of the Blanquerna Observatory on Media, Religion and Culture. And I am also a journalist covering the Vatican since more than 3 decades right now. So the theme that we are dealing here is fascinating for me. And I am very pleased to talk to you in this occasion. There is a relationship between the Pope and Catalonia, even though he has not visited Catalonia, neither Spain, neither Argentina, by the way. So this Pope has visited places, random places, we could also say, very far away, but he knew Catalonia. He knew the Catalan situation, if we would like to call it like this. He was aware of what is going on in Barcelona, in Catalonia, in terms of how the Catholic Church is organized internally, how Montserrat is a shrine that has this spiritual importance, and also obviously for reasons like Messi. So he knew Barcelona in this case for that. Also through Gaudí. Obviously, La Sagrada Familia was the only Catholic cathedral that is being built in Europe right now. So for the Pope, it was something very special and very interesting. He knew Catalonia, but Catalonia obviously was not part of his priorities. He was sensitive also to the Catalan culture and language, but perhaps not as sensitive as previous popes that they came to Catalonia. We need to remind that Pope John Paul II was here November 82 and October 89, so twice. And also that Pope Benedict was here in November 2010. And it was not the case of Francis Pope. But he was reluctant to be instrumentalized, I guess, for political reasons in Spain as such, not in Catalonia. So if he was the idea of coming to Barcelona, he needed to go to Santiago de Compostela or to Avila or to Madrid. So things were complicated and he preferred to skip it. And also I would like to recall that the Pope had a conversation, an interview with Carlo Herrera in COPE in terms of the reconciliation or divisions in the church. And he was very clear that in Spain they need dialogue and they need also to reconcile themselves with past, with the roots. So I appreciate this call to reconciliation and this call to appello al dialogo. In Italian they call it like this call to the continuous dialogue to achieve peace. So it is not possible to achieve peace in black and white, but you really need to negotiate, you really need to sit down, you really need to see things from another side, to use empathy. And I think this is a kind of message that the Pope, that has not, again, Catalonia in his top priorities of the pontificate, but he said so. So this idea of reconciliation and getting rid of bad ideologies that could lead to division, that was an interesting remark. We need to remind that Valentin Miseracs has been a Catalan musician and a priest, president of the Pontifical Institute for Sacred Music, so a very important art foundation in the Vatican. And he is currently canon in Santa Maria la Maggiore, so the place where the Pope is buried. So it is also an interesting link, more eternal, more spiritual if we want, but a very interesting one as well. I am sure that the Sagrada Familia, they already have invited the new Pope to be present in June 2026. So now, very close, very soon, to the Sagrada Familia, because these processes are part of the ordinary life of the Church, so they do not need necessarily to be stopped. And I think Gaudí is a universal saint and no polemics are around him. He is also a model of the virtues, because now we have that, a model of living as a Christian very fully. And I think is a good paradigm, and I think it's also a good sign that the Pope Francis did this in the last few days that he was here in Earth.
Thank you to Míriam Díez for speaking with us. Gerard, Cardinal Omeya is not the only Catalan in the Vatican, is he? There's also the priest Armand Puig, who's from Tarragona.
Yes, and Jordi Bertomeu, Who is he, you may ask? Well, he is considered as many as the James Bond of the Vatican or the 007. He's a Catalan priest, and he was very important in investigating. We talked about sexual abuse before, so he was in charge of investigating sexual offenses, and he was sent by Pope Francis himself to Chile in 2018 to resolve one of the most significant crises surrounding sex offenses against minors in the Catholic Church.
I remember it was in the headlines.
It also affected not only Chile, it affected many countries across the world. In fact, here in Spain, the Spanish Church said that there had been around 200,000 children who were abused or sexually abused by members of the Catholic Church. And in fact, when a report of the French Catholic Church was announced, saying that there had been more than 300,000 abused children, Pope Francis said that he wanted to express his sadness, his pain for the trauma that these children have endured, and also the shame for that for so long, and I'm quoting, the Church has been incapable to put this at the center of its concerns. That's what Pope Francis said back then.
Of course, I think he felt that the issues should be addressed and resolved.
And in fact, obviously, during his burial, his funeral, there were over 250,000 people who asked and prayed for the new Pope to follow his legacy, and in fact, some of them were Catalan congregations who traveled to the Vatican.
We spoke with some of those Catalan congregations who were visiting the Vatican for Pope Francis' funeral to find out about their relationship with the Pope and how they're experiencing this historic moment.
Ha sigut increïble, Aquesta experiència és una cosa, ens sentim molt afortunades de poder estar aquí. Ara que està aquí el Papa és com increïble.
It was incredible, said teenagers Em and Laia in an interview with the Catalan news agency. They had just queued to see Pope Francis' burial site in the Basilica di Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome. This experience is something unique. We feel very fortunate to be here, they added. Now that the Pope is here, it's incredible.
I ara aquí, avui que anaven a anar a missa, doncs a veure quan veiem el Papa, doncs res.
Today we'll attend Mass, Em and Laia continued, and when we see the Pope, we'll pray to him to ask that the next pontiff be like him, so that he may show us his love and serve as a role model, especially for young people.
I que sigui un exemple a seguir.
Pels joves, sobretot.
A day earlier, nun Ana Maria Vilaró attended the massive funeral held at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican City, accompanying some teenagers who had traveled to celebrate the Jubilee of Teenagers.
Doncs nosaltres veníem al Jubileu d'Adolescents, que és convocat just per aquests 3 dies, i va coincidir amb la mort del Papa. Llavors, quan ho vam saber...
When we learned about Pope Francis' death, we decided to try to attend the funeral and be part of this historic event, Ana Maria Vilaró told ACN.
Estan entusiasmats i per veure una miqueta, vull dir, ells saben que és un fet que realment doncs és això, no? Formar part de la nostra història.
The youngsters are excited and they are well aware that this is an event that will go down in history, she added. This is why they are very grateful for what they have experienced and what Pope Francis has represented, and they are excited about what the future may bring.
Jo diria que va obrir les portes de l'Església, sí, a les perifèries, però també a la joventut.
For her, it seems fitting that the Jubilee of Teenagers has coincided with his passing, as Pope Francis not only opened the doors of the Church to marginalized societies, but also to young people. Ana Maria Vilaró accompanied a group of Catalan teenagers like Sara, who we interviewed in the middle of St. Peter's Square during the funeral on April 26.
Home, a mi em sap greu que hagi d'haver passat justament quan havíem de vindre a Roma, però bueno.
She was sad that this had happened during their stay in Rome, but said that it was very beautiful. She was astonished that they were able to reach that spot as it was so crowded.
A mi em sorprèn que haguem pogut arribar fins aquí perquè estava tot ple de gent.
El plan en principi era venir al jubileu, va la celebració i tal.
Arnau, who also traveled to Rome with Ana Maria and Sara, said that they had a weirder feeling as they had planned to travel and celebrate, and not to attend the funeral.
I pues, la veritat és que és com una sensació una mica rara, perquè nosaltres veníem a celebrar, no a fer de funeral.
Meanwhile, I've really enjoyed the historic event.
Pues per mi, a mi m'agrada molt. A mi sempre m'ha agradat molt i...
She's 12 years old, so she highlights the fact that she only knows one Pope, Pope Francis.
He estat jo, sempre que ha estat ell, doncs he estat jo i a mi m'encanta, m'agrada molt.
Jorge Maria Bergoglio, or Pope Francis, was buried on Saturday, April 26, after 3 days of public viewing for mourners to pay their respects. One of these mourners was Judit Padrós, a mother from Sant Celoni, just north of Barcelona.
Ahir vaig poder entrar 2 vegades a veure'l, però me'l sento ressuscitat.
She was able to enter St. Peter's Basilica twice to see Pope Francis and says that she feels he has been resurrected.
No sé, molta il·lusió de ser aquí, però per l'amor que es viu, no?
Judith is living this historic moment with great joy and eternal peace, and is delighted to be there. Her daughter had given her trip to bid farewell to Pope Francis as a gift, after Judith couldn't travel to the Vatican for the burial of Pope John Paul II in 2005.
El papa és un líder mundial. És que el papa el que ens ha transmès és amor.
Judith left all spiritual elements aside to say that Pope Francis was a world leader who has been transmitting everyone's love. Love, tenderness. He has taught us the value of a smile, a word, a hug, and this is something that transcends.
I això transcendeix. Transcendeix a qualsevol creença.
It transcends any belief, she said, and even reaches those without faith. While queuing to enter St. Peter's Basilica for a third time, Judith said that the human values Pope Francis has taught society are useful for everyone, and hopefully his wisdom will live on.
És el papa de tots. Realment és el papa de tots.
Thank you to our colleagues at ACN for bringing us those interviews. For centuries, Catalonia has been Catholic, but in the past few decades, we've seen a rapid secularization, as well as the diversification of religious beliefs, largely due to immigration. And we actually did a podcast about this in April 2021. So if you haven't listened to it yet, then do check it out.
Yeah, and the situation in Catalonia continues to be similar to back then. Data from the Catalan Government Statistics Institute says that, for example, there are 6,000 Catholic sites across Catalonia, and another report says that 71% of Catalans identify themselves with any kind of religion, Catholicism, Judaism, Islam, whichever it is, but only 9.7% of the Catalan population, so 1/10 of the Catalan population, practice religion.
So people identify as spiritual or religious, but they don't actually adhere to organised religion. That's almost all we have time for today, but before we go, it's time for our Catalan phrase of the week. Gerard, what do we have?
Per l'amor de Déu.
For the love of God.
Or for God's sake.
Yes, that's what we'd say in English. And of course, although it refers to God, it's probably used in a secular way, right?
Yeah, you can use it as surprise, annoyance, urgency, or to show strong emotions. Like, it's a joker of a Catalan phrase. You can use it anytime.
It's Monday morning.
Per l'amor de Déu.
This week on Filling the Sink, we've been talking about religion in Catalonia and remembering Pope Francis. Thank you to everyone who spoke with us, and of course, thank you to you, Gerard, for joining me here in the studio.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe to Filling the Sink wherever you get your podcasts if you haven't done so already. We'll be back again this Saturday in just a few days' time with another exciting episode of Filling the Sink. On behalf of all the team here at Catalan News, I'm Beth Cohen, wishing you a great week. Fins aviat. Adeu.